All right. Thank you for coming. It's good to have you here. First visit to Megafest. When I was doing my bit of research regarding your career, a couple of sites mentioned how a lot of people have difficulty pronouncing your surname, Pantoliano.
Yep.
Do I get it?
Say it again.
Pantoliano.
It's Pantoliano.
All right, good. Now, your parents, were they from Italy, or are you first generation, or were they born in America?
My mother was born in New Jersey, in Hoboken, New Jersey, as well as my father. My grandparents were born in Italy, except for my maternal grandmother.
Okay. What part of Italy, though?
Well, you know, it's interesting. If you read my first book, Who's Sorry Now, I talk about the unknowing of, the identity of my biological father. Mm-hmm. If it was really Dominic Pantoliano or my cousin Florio Isabella, which was alleged by my mom. So recently, after all of these years, my sister wanted to know finally that if we were full brother and sister, so we did a DNA test, and it turned out that I am not a Pantoliano.
Oh.
In fact, I don't know who my biological father is.
Mystery lineage.
Yeah, so which is a shame because it's such a hard name to say.
Pretender to the
I'm a Centrella. My mother's maiden name is Centrella. They're from Avellino. But my DNA, which is a fascinating thing, I did it with 23andMe. It's like $90, and then I did it again with Ancestry.com, which is a larger database. But it also pulls up all of your genetic relatives that are in the system. So it came up with about 900 and so on relatives from based on sections where you connected. And so I came to find out one of the closer cousins lived in Jersey City, and that's the town above Hoboken. When I was growing up in Hoboken, there was a lot of waterfront Italian neighborhoods. There was a lot of people from Monte San Giacomo, which is the Pantolianos are from. There was a lot of people from Moffetta, and it turns out I have a lot of Moffetta blood in me.
It's southern?
It's on the Gulf part of the boot.
Okay.
It's on the inside, like Sarasota would be in Florida.
Okay,
yeah. And I also discovered that a large portion of my bloodline is Jewish, which explains why I never buy retail. So, just when it's become unpopular to be Jewish, I find out I'm Jewish. Never break.
All right, thank you, though. Let's see, a lot of fans, first they came to know you from your portrayal of the immortal Guido the Killer Pimp. But before your screen debuts, you did theater work.
Yeah, I did a lot of theater.
Yeah.
And when I, looking back on my humble beginnings and that, also looking at the industry as a whole and how America as a middle-class nation that thrived, that's really being decimated by greed in corporate America and the deconstruction of unions. My beginnings afforded me many opportunities that I think now as a young man, when I joined the Screen Actors Guild, I think I was like Where am my union card? I guess I don't. But I was like, 7,400. I talked to Lorenzo Quinn about this, and his dad, Anthony Quinn, when he joined the union, he was number like 7, right? It was Cagney, all these guys, and it was a time where people embraced their good fortune and wanted to take care of those less fortunate guys. Cagney would start stalling around, the 8th hour so that the extras could get another day's work, and now it's become something else. And so the kind of opportunities that I had were astounding to me, but I think the competition is so much greater. That as an actor starting out, and I was like 18 years old when I went to New York to start studying acting. It was because of those opportunities and the fact that I had a lot of obstacles to overcome because I was undiagnosed dyslexia and when I discovered acting in the senior class play, I remember I just remember doing a scene, and there was a kind of quiet where I could actually sense the audience hanging on my thoughts, and it was such an overwhelming feeling that I've been chasing that feeling my whole life, and afterwards, 2 of my teachers, my English and history teacher, they were just passing me through because I was really hopeless. And they said, you have an aptitude for that. Because I'm basically a born liar, and I'm always comfortable in is my fantasy life, and I had a cousin, Pantoliano, that got in all kinds of trouble, because every time I got in trouble in school, they would say, "What's your name?" And I said, "Pantoliano." So he would always take beatings. Even when I got arrested for, mischief after football games, by the middle of the year, they would say, "Oh, okay, Doriso, we're calling your sister." And my cousin took beatings after beatings for a long time. It wasn't until I was in my 40s, especially when I wrote the book, when he read the book, and he says, "It was you bastard." But I had to, my teacher said that if I wanted to be an actor, I needed to learn how to read, and I was like, why? I just didn't comprehend the one with the other. So, if anything, I think that my luck held out longer than my
Yeah, it's interesting. Tom Cruise is dyslexic, I believe.
But I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
I found that out years later.
Yeah, the risky business, James. Right? Yeah.
What's that?
No, well, dyslexia, I'm saying.
Well, so dyslexia is actually a gift in terms of creative artists, because we're visual. It's like we can't see things. We have to be shown. It's hard to read it. So I think the creative gene is born out of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the more popular children's fantasy series, Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. Percy's dyslexic. All the prodigy of the gods.
Thinks he's dyslexic.
They read in ancient Greek and they think it's dyslexia.
Yeah, the father who, I actually did that show.
For his son, Rick Riordan.
Yeah, he wrote, he created a character. And but I just finished reading a script that Ben Affleck is doing about an autistic kind of, not a superhero, but an autistic savant, who is a savant of numbers. And he has the capacity, because of his genius in terms of the literal sense of math, that he works with a lot of these cartels, and they pay him in cash and in artwork. But because of his relationship with these businesses, they always try to kill him. Because they can, it's better for the bottom line. But his father, the storyline is that his father taught him how to protect himself, so he's like, kung fu. I find that interesting. Recently my grandson was diagnosed with, autistic. And when I found out about autism, I would say about 15 years ago. And I saw a documentary, it was incredibly moving. And the numbers then was 166. When I was born, it was like 1 in 75,000. And then, so 15 years ago, it was 1 in 166, and now it's 1 in 3 boys.
Well, the spectrum is growing so much.
Yeah.
Has he been diagnosed? How far along?
He's actually just recently been diagnosed, so he's 2.5, so they don't know yet.
Yeah. Well, they're doing so much with it now, though. I mean, so many strides, excuse me, with treatments.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that everything that occurs to us is environmental. Whether it's emotional disease or physical disease. And the more interested I've become in that, like when oncologists 25 years ago decided that they wanted to get out of the cancer business and they wanted to get into preventative medicine, because there's a lot of it is our choice.
You mentioned, what's Ben Affleck's involvement in that film? Is it a
He's
script?
doing the lead in it.
He's acting in it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's called The Accountant.
Okay. Now that reminds me of one of my, actually a role that I enjoyed, one of your roles that I enjoyed a lot. It's probably one of the highlights of the film. The Daredevil adaptation. Was it Phil Urich, the news, the reporter from Daredevil? Ben Urich or Phil? I can't remember.
The Daredevil fans out there, remember the guy's name?
Oh, yeah.
Ben Urich, is Phil his nephew or something? I think, it's Phil Urich.
No, Phil Urich will be the guy, the 30-something guy that's going to play my part in the TV show.
Oh yeah, that's right, the new series. But that was a good take on the character, Ben Urich. I like that a lot. It's interesting because you did so much serious work and then a lot of genre stuff too, The Matrix and Percy Jackson. That role. What was his Percy's mother's Gabe. Is that it, Gabe?
Gabe.
Yeah, he was. And then the end.
I like that. I like how lucky I've been in terms of these characters' names.
Oh, yeah.
I like Gabe. That's a great name. Cypher, Guido, the Killer Pimp. I mean, if I just played Guido, it would have been all right. I was like pizzeria. It's like when Curtis Armstrong had that line, great, I got a trig exam, I'm being chased by Guido the Killer Pimp. Then the character name became Guido the Killer Pimp. When people recognized it today, they go, Guido the Killer Pimp.
I want to take some questions from the audience, but one last thing, when you mentioned about the Screen Actors Guild, like when Anthony Quinn was number 7 out of 15 or something,
yeah.
And when you joined, you were out of how many?
I think I was like, in the 7,200s.
Okay.
In 1971, and now there's
now
like 1,100,000. The other thing is like, what people don't understand is that the average income for an actor, the numbers have changed, but when I last looked into this, which was maybe 5 years ago, of 100% of acting members that have a union card, 95% of them make nothing a year.
From acting.
So then you got so now you're down with 5% of, let's say, 1 million. So what is that, 5,000 people? 5% of 1 million?
I was an English major.
Well, so of that 5%, the average income is $5,000 a year. So again, you got to have a second job, which is acting, show business. But what I think, what's happening, what's great, what's in our future, is the ability to make our own movies. I just recently saw, yesterday, I went with my daughter and some of her friends to see the Hunger Games sequel. And did anybody see that yet?
Not to do one.
What I was most interested in is the film crew that goes out. That have, they just have these little things, and I think that really is futuristic in terms of understanding that we're gonna, if anybody's old enough to remember what Easy Rider did to the industry when that movie was made for something like 400 grand. You know, it was made on 16 millimeter and, you know, really guerrilla filmmaking. But I think somebody's going to make a movie that's just going to cross the aisle, that'll be made like on people's iPhones. And so the middle person is being, can then, you know, corporate America. I'm reading a book now that Fellini wrote, collaborated with a woman, you know, I think it was produced in like 1990. And what he talked about as a creative artist was what he didn't like was begging for money, you know, going after and having to get the money, to get somebody to give him the money to make his next movie, you know. And I think because of the corporate scheme of things and how it's just kind of like a cancer over all creativity, where things can't get made because they don't think it'll sell. You know, it's like you have an idea and the agents say, well, that's not what they're buying this year, and they don't want to go out with it. You know, and you have to be responsible for your own vision. That sooner than later we're going to be able to make these things only because they're so easy to fail. You know, what's the worst that can happen? When you look at the movie industry, it was never an industry that people made money in. You know, they were providing entertainment, and they didn't report how much money a movie made. Now it's all like, it's like the stock market. And they don't say if it was good or bad, or if it moved you or if it didn't move you. They tell you what the weekend numbers were. And, you know, and the mindset is, well, if it didn't open, why should I see it? You know, and you watch Turner Classic Movies and you see all these movies that pretty much were failures when they opened. And
Financial failures.
Yeah, financial
But
failures,
great
and
movie
it's
stuff.
like, wow. I think it's very promising. Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask you about your experience with working with Christopher Nolan in Memento.
Yeah.
And did you know then that he was a genius? And what was your experience with that particular film?
Well, you know, it'd be so easy for me to say, yeah, I knew he was a fucking genius.
Did you see an inkling?
Well, you know, I must say that I have a pretty good bullshit detector. You know, I don't suffer from it well, and that when I go after jobs and I want, you know, it's always like I get a sense of the creator. Now, I can tell you that when I met Chris Nolan, that I just had a feeling that the guy knew what he had a very clear idea of the movie that was in his mind. And I also remember the reason I met him was I had just come back from doing The Matrix with Carrie-Anne Moss. We were in Australia. And there was this movie that was being done, and she mentioned me, and the guys hired me. And we were shooting that in I think in Vancouver or Toronto, I forget. And then she said, you know, Joey Pantoliano would be good for this job. And so I met Chris Nolan at a coffee shop. And you know, it was impossible to understand that script, as well as it was impossible to understand The Matrix, for that matter. And I keep getting cast in these jobs that I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. But I remember, you know, telling my agent that I wasn't his guy. You know, it felt like, I mean, although he was cordial and smart, and you know, and he took the time to talk to me about the project. I said he's not going to go with me, and I was right. He went with somebody else who ultimately they couldn't make the deal, and then they came to me. And but the experience, and I just was with Emma and Chris and Jonah. They invited us to see their new movie. What's it called? Interstellar. So I went to the screening in New York, and then I saw them afterwards. And the experience of working with Chris and Emma and Jonah, you know, was really a family thing. And what I remember vividly and fondly is the detail in which Chris worked with the actors, and how we kind of faux blocked scenes that would require more time with like we had 3 days of blocking rehearsals, and then I worked, we shot that movie in 23 days. But we would meet at my house on weekends. I had a little garage in Santa Monica, and so we'd go in the garage, and it was Emma, Chris, and Guy Pearce and I, and we would work on the scenes we were going to shoot that week, and we would talk about it, we would improvise, and Emma would take notes and rewrite stuff, and then we would shoot that week, and we did that for like 3 weekends in a row. And that was a lot of fun, and I have nothing but fond memories. What I do remember is how ambitious Chris was, and how smart he was, and how singularly confident he was in his vision. And I've seen that only a couple of times in my career.
Great film.
Thanks.
Okay, tons of questions. I'll take one. But now, in The Goonies, right, you got to work with the late great Anne Ramsey. Any interesting stories with her, because she's just great.
You know, when I think of Annie Ramsey, I think of her and Logan, her husband, and we had a lot of fun. And you know, Logan was a great character actor that everybody knew in hundreds of shows. But Annie was just a really good actor that had to grow into the part, you know. So when she got that job, it was first lead in the movie, and she loved it. And she actually got me in to the Academy, a motion picture membership. She told me how it worked, and this is before they were giving away video. She said, you know, you get to vote. And so I said, how it works is that a member has to nominate a member, and you get to nominate one member a year. And so she brought the card in, and she endorsed me. She sponsored me. But I needed another name, another acting Academy member. And that day, Patty Duke was visiting Sean on the set. So I said, hey, Patty, would you sponsor me? She said, sure. She just signed it. And that's how I got in. So it's like all this horse shit is luck. You got to be lucky, and you got to be willing to be lucky. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us anything about your upcoming Netflix show with the Wachowskis?
Yeah, it's called Sense8, and it's going to be on sometime in 2015. And I've signed a gag order, so that's pretty much all I can do. Otherwise, I'll tell you this, I'm still waiting to get paid from those guys. I think back in August. Yeah.
I love doing Midnight Run. How much fun was it working with Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin?
Well, you know, actually, Grodin lives in Wilton, Connecticut, where I live now. And Rob De Niro was great to work with. I mean, just a really dedicated actor who was a lot of fun and has a great sense of humor, and not like the persona that they put out there, you know.
Right.
You know, when it's about the work, he's all about it. Marty Brest was really the true hero of that movie, and you know, when you see that film, it is so goddamn perfect and so relevant even now. I mean, I see a lot of these movies that I really loved, or you know, some I were in, but how they don't hold up. They become dated, and I think that holds up very well.
It doesn't seem dated now. You can still go watch it and enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little secret. They're trying to do a sequel, and about, I guess, 6 months ago, are you rolling? Because if you're rolling, then I can't tell you the sequel. It's a secret, I don't want anybody to know. And they had a script that they're trying to do. And I was surprised how underdeveloped it was. So I don't know if they're gonna make it.
For all the original characters you got for that, if there is.
Those of us who are still alive.
Great.
At least I got something to try to live for. Yeah.
Hi, Joe, how are you? Can you describe when you get a script, can you describe your creative process to prepare for that?
The process has changed over the years. I read it a lot, depending on the size of my job. But I read it a lot. I read the scenes a lot, and I get a breakdown of, simply who I might be and what I want, and what happened before. But I don't try to learn it too well, because I want to be able to be surprised on the day, And so you can have a series of ideas and like physical life, thinking about how to create a physical life for the character. Like in life, like right now, I'm trying to find what the next thought is going to be. And so experimenting with new technology to trick myself, because really, as far as I'm concerned, what's been most interesting in my success is the accidents that occurred. So I try to keep myself spiritually available for creative accidents that'll trick me into being spontaneous and in the moment when the camera's rolling. I just recently did a show for CBS, and it was a sitcom, and it didn't get picked up, but I could tell that the producers were anxious because they didn't get a real sense of what I was doing in the rehearsals, and I kept, I use the rehearsals for what they really are. And they said, we need to see what you're going to do. And I said, is the film, is the camera rolling? Is it rolling? When the audience gets here, it's going to be, they're such a huge part of this. And, and sure enough, when it happened, it was, the audience really responded to the character because I had no set plans yet. And I saw some of the people that were doing really well in rehearsals that were thrown because the audience wasn't responding what the writers were laughing at during the rehearsal. So it's actually a work in progress. I still see films, and I realize that there's so little that I need to do in these moments, and that the hardest thing to achieve in film acting is stillness, is being still, and allowing the other departments to fill in the gaps, knowing that by just being still and alive internally, that the music is going to carry those moments through. And sometimes what I do, and you should try this too, is watch a movie without any sound. Just watch the actors. When I look at video playback, I always look at it without any sound, because I'm looking at the visuals side. Not what I say, it's what I do. I had an acting teacher used to say, what are your actions? What's your objective, and how do you physicalize it? Never mind what the words say. What is the physical life of the character by doing what? Yeah.
Do you prefer the directors that let you improvise more than the ones that are straight from the words?
Yeah, I've had more luck with those kinds of. The other thing that I was thinking about this the other day. Ambition is rewarded much more than talent in my industry. And so if you are ambitious enough, you're going to get a chance. And because there's so many opportunities out there, there are so few filmmakers that really know what they want. You know, so they're not directors, they're guessers, they're guessing at it. And some guys are really good at, I mean, like there's some filmmakers like Warren Beatty, who would do 40 or 50 takes and be inspired by what he saw, you know, and then, you know, and that's what editors do. Editors, they find, their job is to cut out the boring parts, you know. So when they've seen something in the frame that's alive, that's what they're prone to put into the movie. They want to keep it alive. But I was always trained not to expect much. I actually, the directors I like the most are the ones that don't talk to me. I figure that they like what I'm doing, that they, you know, they'll say, but if they don't like what I'm doing, they'll say something.
So you did an episode of Dinner for Five with Jon Favreau, and it's basically a bunch of actors and musicians sitting around a table talking. Was there a lead into that? Did you just show up and did it just happen, or did you meet with these people before?
Just showed up.
And it's just off the cuff.
It's all off the cuff.
And how cool is that? The episode, I looked it up, the episode you were on with David Byrne, Dave Eggers, Jon Favreau, of course, and Janine Garofalo.
Yeah, and two of those guys, the first two guys you mentioned, I didn't know who they were. I still don't. The interesting thing was, it was a very fancy Italian restaurant on 34th Street. And I, you know, I'm very public about, I'm a recovering alcoholic. And I haven't had a drink in over 10 years. But I was drinking wine during the show, and so they had this amazing wine list. And had, you know, Antinori Tignanello, which is one of the original hybrids where they took different grapes and mixed it. It was a wonderful wine. And there was like a very, very like off the chart year, and I said, we can have anything on this. Yeah, so, all right, let's you know, have the 68 Tignanello, which was like $375 a bottle. Back then, I mean, this show is what, 20 years old already?
It's 2003, so it's 11 years ago.
11 years ago. Still a good year. So when the guy opened the, you know, wine, and I smelled it, and it smelled cork, you know, it was smelling vinegar. It was no good. I mean, in my humble opinion. And I was like, I gotta say something. I think these people can't drink this. So I said, I think this wine is cork. And you know, the Salvador was like, and sure enough, thank God I was right. Can you imagine if I was wrong? So that was fun. Yes.
So, thanks for joining us, Dan. Ralphie was amazing. I think one of the most gruesome deaths in the entire series. The bathtub. So my husband couldn't be here, and he texted me a question. He wrote,
It's $30 if I ask. I'll make an exception.
okay, so he had written to me, for someone who was so good at the business end with Tony, why did Ralphie keep